Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. I'm Bruce Delmonico, Assistant Dean for Admissions here at the Yale School of Management. We're pleased to have you with us for this online student panel. It is now noon Eastern Time here in the US, here in New Haven. We have 5 students, a combination of first years and second years, who have agreed to spend the next 45 minutes. We should be done around 12:45 because they have to get to class, with us to talk about all aspects of the student's experience here at the Yale School of Management. It's pretty wide-ranging. We have lots of questions that you've already submitted. As we go, feel free to submit additional questions. We'll try to incorporate as many as we can to touch on as many aspects of what it's like to be a student here at Yale as possible. Before we get going, I'd love it if the students maybe could introduce yourselves and just share a little bit about maybe what you were doing before, what you're doing now, what you hope to do after you graduate, whether you're first year or second year, if you're a second year where you interned for your internship. And then we'll take it from there. So maybe we could start with the front row. We're doing a little bit of a front row, back row format, which is a little different than usual based on the classroom setup here. So if you want to, get going.
Hi everyone, I'm Vivian Owen. I am currently a second year, also a joint degree with the School of Public Health, so I'm pursuing an MBA and PH. Prior to SOM, I was in the San Francisco Bay Area working for a large nonprofit health system. Coming to SOM, I really wanted to build on my leadership skills and pivot to consulting. So this past summer, I interned at Deloitte in Chicago in their healthcare M&A practice, and I will be returning to the firm after I graduate, but in the San Francisco office.
All right, and hi everyone, I'm Eric Esty, I'm a first year. Prior to SOM, I worked in internal strategy consulting in New York City and also served in the Air National Guard. At SOM, looking to transition my civilian career to aerospace and defense. And while I'm here, I'm focused mostly on Veterans Club as kind of the big emphasis item for me, and looking for an internship in aerospace for the summer.
Great, thanks.
I'm Dave New, second year at SOM, came from the military as well, was in the Navy, also spending a lot of my time working on the Vets Club stuff. Did my internship at Procter & Gamble out in Cincinnati, and I'm going back.
Hi, I'm Abby Loesch. I am a first year, and before SOM, I was also in the San Francisco Bay Area, working for a nonprofit where we did marketing consulting for other nonprofits. And at SOM, I'm hoping to make a transition into private sector marketing.
Great.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm a second year. Before Yale, I was at Dropbox doing revenue growth strategy in San Francisco. This past summer, I interned at Atlassian, which is another enterprise SaaS tech firm, also in San Francisco. Here at Yale, I keep myself busy as a career advisor to a lot of the first years. I'm also involved with the Title IX Awareness Committee. And after graduating, I will be a consultant for Bain & Company in San Francisco.
Great. The Bay Area is very well represented on this panel. I think we have people from other parts of the country and the rest of the world as well. So it's not just people from San Francisco in military. So just to kick it off, again, we have lots of questions that you all submitted beforehand. I'd love to cover as much as we can. But just generally, I think obviously the people who are attending this session are interested in possibly getting an MBA. So it'd be great to hear from you all. Just atmospherically, why you decided to get an MBA in general, what you were hoping to gain from the degree. And as I told the panelists beforehand, I won't ask everyone to answer every question because we do want to get through as much as we can, but maybe for this one, if everyone could just give a thought or two about why you want to get an MBA. If we want to go around, I won't ask Vivian, I won't ask you to start every question, but maybe just one more time around the same route.
Absolutely. So like I mentioned earlier, I was working for a nonprofit health system, and my role in that health system was very tactical. I was the community deployment lead for a program that the health system was working on with government entities as well as nonprofits in the Bay Area. And going back to school, I really wanted to transition into more strategy type of roles and wanted to make sure that I had the skill set to do that, which is why I ended up pursuing both an MBA and an MPH, given my interest in healthcare and also wanting to develop those leadership skills to help me succeed in the future.
And for me, I spent 8 years roughly in internal strategy consulting, which was great, but my biggest concern was that as an advisor, really, I didn't really get the opportunity to truly own product and own a process from start to finish. So that drove me to seek a transition into aerospace, which is a personal area of passion of mine. And the MBA fit my desires because it helped me to round out my sort of fundamental business skills, in particular, the more financial aspects of what it takes to run a business.
For me, coming from a non-business background and transitioning out of the military, like I really didn't know what I wanted to do or where to start. So an MBA was a great way for me to kind of get to shop around a bit, get to meet a lot of different people, a lot of different backgrounds, and also gain a lot of the technical skills and knowledge that I just didn't have about the business world. And so for me, the MBA was just about basically career swapping. It's the short version, I guess.
It's similar for a similar career swap for me. So, like I said, I worked at a nonprofit before SOM and did marketing consulting there, and really enjoyed marketing and sort of developed a passion for that. But was really frustrated working with nonprofits after a while, so wanted to make a transition into the private sector. Didn't have a business background. I did liberal arts in undergrad, so really felt like an MBA was sort of the best way to make that transition.
I decided to pursue an MBA for 2 reasons. The first reason was at Dropbox, I felt like the learning curve had flattened for me. Felt like I was answering a lot of more questions rather than asking them, so I wanted to return to the classroom. The second reason is that I really wanted to accelerate my career. I was fully intending to return to tech, but I knew that with an MBA I could get to a higher position.
Great, thank you all. And then just drilling down a little bit more specifically, beyond the MBA generally, have a few questions about Yale SOM specifically, and starting with, why did you decide to come here to Yale, and what kind of set the school apart that caused you to be here as opposed to other opportunities? And so maybe just a couple of thoughts on that to get things going.
I guess I can start that up. One of the big things for me was, again, coming from such an atypical background, like my biggest fear coming to an MBA program was that I would only surround myself with people like me, or I'd have a hard time kind of like really getting out of my comfort zone. So as a whole, I mean, Yale was very, very inclusive and good with that, but in particular, the learning team aspect where you do a lot of your work the first year with this group of about 9 people, and it's a very diverse group. I mean, I ended up paired up with somebody in the Peace Corps, like learned a lot from each other, and it was a really good kind of head start to kind of get out of that comfort zone and like really push yourself out there, meet other people, and kind of expand your horizons a bit.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a similar reason. Coming from a non-traditional background, I wanted to make sure that I was at a place where, I wasn't just going to be surrounded by former consultants and bankers. And so you really get that. At SOM, it's like a very diverse set of people. And then also I studied Chinese in undergrad and then didn't use it in my job. So I really wanted some like really good global opportunities.
I'll add to that. As a joint degree and knowing that I wanted to pursue that, I was limited to a certain set of schools that would offer a joint degree program with the MBA and the MPH. And what it really came down to for me was just the culture here. Yale really prides itself on being very integrated as a campus, and I think as a joint degree at SOM, I am able to add a perspective that is diverse and different, and I really feel valued for that. And then taking what I learned here and bringing it to the public health school and my other classes has been really valuable for that community there as well, and just feeling like it is a really holistic experience that's very integrated.
That's great, thank you. And you all touched on a number of different topics having to do with academics and sort of the culture and integration with the rest of the university, which are all important aspects of the experience, I think. So I'd love to try and drill down on each of those a little bit. Maybe starting with academics. And I know we have both second years who've been through the core, first years who are now in the core. Talk if anyone has some thoughts on just the integrated curriculum and how you've experienced that in a way that has allowed you to be think differently than you otherwise would if you were just kind of approaching things from a more traditional, kind of functionally siloed approach to the curriculum.
Sure, I'll kick that one off. So for those of you who may not be aware, the core set is arranged so that your classes are arranged as perspectives, right? So you have the CFO perspective or the CMO perspective, but in either case, you're not looking just at marketing by itself. You look at it as part of the overall business environment. As someone who's going through the core right now, It's helpful because as you're talking about how you want to approach your consumers from a marketing perspective with pricing strategy, you're also pulling elements from your competitor class where you're trying to assess how your competitors are going to react to your pricing strategy. So it's more reflective in my mind of the real world in that you're never just going to look at marketing in a silo. You're really going to incorporate marketing principles and into an overarching approach to your customer, your investors, what have you.
And sort of as an add-on to that, I know one aspect of the experience is also, the fact that the courses are taught to a large degree by case method, but using the raw cases here. And I don't know if anyone has thoughts on the raw case method that we use here that's maybe a little bit different than a traditional case method at other schools. Not that you've experienced that at other schools, but maybe just commenting on the raw case method here.
I mean, personally, I like it. It gets to get a little deeper in. In particular, I found it's helpful. I mean, it can be a lot of reading, but that's where the team aspect comes in.
Yeah.
And it's very good to have these like really wholesome kind of debates, and not to keep going back to the team thing. But one nice thing is because you keep working with the same people, like you don't have to kind of do like the pleasantries and kind of figure out. You have like a really good group dynamics. You can really dive deep into these cases and kind of tear them apart and you don't always agree, but you can kind of get a little deeper, I think, than we can with some of the other cases. Because not that we don't ever do other cases that we may borrow from other schools.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think the idea behind raw cases is that, in the real world, you're never going to get like a perfect HBS 10-page case with all the information that you need in it. So it's like more reflective of what you would get in the real world.
And this is not something that was submitted beforehand, but before this session started, you all were talking about your cohorts. And so for those of you who are listening might not know, so that each class is divided into 5 cohorts, and you take all your core classes with that cohort. And each cohort develops a little bit of their own personality. So I know, not to replicate the conversation we had beforehand, but I don't know, a few thoughts about sort of the personality of your cohorts, just to get a sense of what life in the real life is like here at SOM.
Starting. So my cohort was definitely the talkative one. They really liked to challenge the professors on like, everything. We also, I think, we were a very fun cohort. We like to think of ourselves as kind of fun but nerdy. We probably logged the most overtime here too, which is not always the best. But yeah, it was interesting going into other cohorts and kind of experiencing how different they were. I mean, not like it's the other side of the world or anything, but like you can kind of get a different feel. I know, like I took a class in Viv's cohort last year, and that was definitely an experience.
Just to add on to that, so I was in the red cohort, so all the cohorts are colored. And then we all have about like 60 to 70 people in each cohort. So there's red, green, blue, silver, and gold. And how the first year works is that, yes, you take all your core classes together and you have cohort reps who really try to build community, and they plan all these fun events and try to have you mingle with your second year counterparts as well. And your learning team, which is that small group that we've been talking about that you do all your work with, is also within your cohort. Some fun things that we did last year, we had like cohort Olympics and just lots of like friendly competitions between the cohorts to just try to get us to meet other people and go outside of our typical group.
And gold won the Olympics, so that's always good.
Gold was second. It's fun.
Who's better anyway?
Which cohorts were the ones that you said there were 2 that clap at the end of each class?
Yeah.
Green and blue?
Second year
Second
blue.
year blue,
Second year-
not first year blue.
First year blue did not adopt that.
We chose not to.
Okay, that's fair. I guess that was a bit of a segue into the culture at SOM. Obviously, each cohort has slightly different personality, but there's an overarching, I think, culture that kind of permeates the school generally. And just get some thoughts from y'all on how you would describe that and what have you've experienced that in your time here at Yale.
Yeah, I could speak to that. I think the culture at Yale, I appreciate it more because of my experience in undergrads. I went to UC Berkeley, which is a gigantic public university. And so there I just got used to anonymity and not really knowing anyone when I walked down a hall, and that was a completely normal experience. Whereas at Yale, somehow everyone knows everything already before you do, and there's always something that is going on, something that will interest you. There will always be some group of people to go with, which is really fun. I think thinking more granularly, my learning team I really appreciated because somehow this magical algorithm that comes up with your learning team, for mine, it was really great for me to speak up because I am very introverted because my entire learning team is extremely introverted, which means that everyone has equal airtime because no one's really, weren't any personality clashes, which I really appreciated and added a lot to my academic experience.
That's great.
I think one of the big things here for the culture for me was like, it's almost shocking how cooperative it is. And literally there were times last year, so I mean, the group of people last year was recruiting for brand management, like we all pretty much knew each other. I mean, it's a pretty tight group. And if a company came here and literally was recruiting for one spot, we would still work together to prep for that, even though we're technically competing for it. And it makes life a lot better when people are trying to help instead of just get ahead.
That's great. And a question about, I know there's no typical day at SOM, I'm sure every day is different, but in a theoretical typical day, what kinds of, obviously there are classes, but what other types of things would you be doing in a day, and sort of what would that look like?
I can take a stab at that.
Yeah.
I'll describe what my day was like yesterday.
Okay,
How
that
about
sounds good.
So I came to school probably at like 9:30 to meet up with someone in my learning team and finish our homework. So you work a lot during your first year, you work a lot with your learning team, your small learning team of about 4 or 5 people. And then I had class, then I went to a marketing club meeting where they talked about casing for marketing interviews. Then I had customer class, which is like our version of marketing. Then I met up with people who I'm working on a case competition with. And then I went to a marketing recruiting prep team meeting. It's a long name. But yeah, so basically my day started at 9:30, it ended at 6:30. It's pretty action-packed with lots of different classes, club activities, meetings with learning teammates.
Right. Maybe one other.
Well,
Eric, you look like.
I'd just add that Wednesday nights is hockey night.
Yeah.
Which is the best club at SOM. So really, I mean, this is just one example of the fun stuff that goes on. Hockey club accepts any and all comers. Doesn't matter if you've ever skated before in your life, you can play. Everyone gets on the ice, different levels, play with people of similar levels, and you just have a really good time. And it's actually to the point where I've heard of ideas to create a hockey fan club because people always end up showing up in the stands to cheer us on. And it's from 9 to 11. You'd think at the end of a long day, like Abby just described, you just want to go home and sleep, but everybody goes out, plays, and has an awesome time, and then goes to the bar afterwards.
I was going to say, that's usually a big part of it too, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it's usually about 100 people?
Yeah, there's too many to count, so you're probably right. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Something quick
Yeah,
to
please.
that? I think that when I was coming into business school, I was a little bit worried about how I would balance what was going on in my life before business school. I think we're not blank canvases like we were going into undergrad, so I really wanted to balance so I'm remembering my past, doing things in the present, and building for the future. That's really what business school is for. And so I tried to balance it 40, 30, 30. 40% was doing things for class or being in class. 30% was what am I going to do to make sure that my past and current relationships are thriving. So it's making new friends, networking, calling my parents once in a while. And the other 30% was personal development. So into that I put in working out, recruiting, case interviewing, going into a random Excel class. So I think that you do need to force yourself to balance things a little bit because business school is a wonderful place to be confused because they totally let you indulge that confusion, but it's also really important to be deliberate about how you're going to balance everything.
Yeah. And that's a great segue too, because one aspect of, especially at Yale, of sort of balancing things, there's a lot to do here at SOM, but there's the entire university that's open to you, both academically and in terms of other activities. And Vivian, you kind of reference this as a joint degree student. You're plugged into public health and what's going on there, but even students who are not pursuing a joint degree are leveraging different parts of the university. So I'd love to get a sense of how you all are doing that and any advice you have about how to tap into the larger Yale community during your time here at SOM. Who whoever wants to start. Yeah.
I can talk a little bit about plugging into both communities. So there's only about 20 joint degrees who are doing the MBA and PH. So we're a pretty tight-knit community overall between the first and second years. And I split my time between the two campuses. So just to give you an idea, the public health campus is all the way downtown where the medical school is, as well as the health system, the Yale New Haven health system. So traveling between the two schools can definitely be, trying at times, especially when it starts to get cold. But I really try to make it down there because the public health community is really vibrant. There are lots of great talks about global health, and lots of really great speakers come to the medical school as well. So trying to always spend at least part of the week going to one talk somewhere on campus, just because Yale brings in, as you can imagine, incredible speakers, really industry leading folks, and also folks that have built incredible movements within their fields. So really making sure that you step outside of the SOM bubble every now and then to enrich your life even further.
That's great. Thank you. Any other thoughts about connecting to the rest of the university?
I would add, not just from a community perspective, from an academic perspective, it's
Yep.
also very easy to bridge from SOM to classes outside of our business school. You can take pretty much any class at Yale, which is amazing. That includes, obviously, School of Forestry, Yale Law School, the other graduate schools, as well as undergraduate schools, or undergraduate classes, if you have interest in that, and there are ways to get credit, even in some cases, for some of those classes. It's incredibly easy. So the fact that you're at SOM actually empowers you to take advantage of the entire Yale University academic offering, and that's incredible when you think about the scale of that school.
Yeah. And I think even at parts of the university you wouldn't otherwise think of, I think one of the more popular classes is visual storytelling over at the drama school, which you wouldn't automatically think of as a relevant class for SOM students, but obviously if you think more about it, it actually has a high degree of relevance. And I know there's actually one question in terms of classes about increasing foreign language fluency. And Abby, you said you had taken Chinese beforehand. I don't know if you have plans to continue that here, because I think that's also very popular. Chinese is popular, sort of German, Japanese, other languages, and you can tap into all the language classes at the university as well.
Yeah, I do, absolutely. Plan to take some Chinese classes next year because first year is mostly core. But second year is all electives. You can take classes at SOM, you can take all of your classes somewhere else. So yeah, I plan to take probably a couple of Chinese classes and brush up on that.
And I know someone right now is taking German. Like, it's very doable.
Yeah.
I mean,
Keeping with the greater Yale theme, a question about what your favorite Yale tradition is. I guess it could be an SOM theme, an SOM tradition as well, but if anyone has a favorite tradition they want to share.
I mean, the Gartzke Cup's pretty cool. Yeah. So it's, at the end, so the hockey team, they practice, they have all the different skill levels, and then at the end, there's a first year versus second year match, and everyone comes out and makes signs, and my favorite part of it is because you have all the different skill levels, they match you up with people of a similar level, but you rotate through those. So you go from the top line where there's, people who are playing like Division I hockey at like very good schools, and then you rotate to the bottom line where people are just falling for no reason. And it's equally fun for different reasons. And so like I played last year, fell a bunch. This year I'm just going to watch and maybe not be bruised, but I think that's my favorite.
Okay. That's a good one. Any other favorite traditions?
Something that happened recently was the Harvard-Yale game, which is a game that takes place every year. It's a American football game where Yale plays Harvard, and they alternate hosting. So last year it was here at Yale, and this year it was in Boston. Really, really fun time for all of the Yaleys to come together and meet people from different schools. SOM always has their own bar tailgate event, but it gives you an opportunity, of course, to go watch some football and then meet people from all walks of Yale life.
Not to harp on the hockey thing,
Yeah.
but the day before the Harvard-Yale game, there's always an
Yes.
SOM HBS hockey game.
That's right.
And it's great. It's in good fun, and we won.
Did you? That was up in Cambridge?
Yes.
Yeah,
Nice.
It was a great game.
That's excellent.
Can we call IE a tradition?
Yeah.
Or should we go into that later?
Yeah.
We can, do you want to talk about that now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So Yale SOM provides an experience called the IE, which stands for International Experience. Basically, it's an all expenses paid trip for you and your B school friends, I mean at SOM, to take a class about some topic surrounding a country and then actually going to visit that country with your professor to speak to business leaders and learn about that country. I had the fortune to go to South Africa, where we learned about post-apartheid business transformations. We spoke to journalists. We spoke to the sub-Saharan African leader for Goldman Sachs. We spoke to a top aide for the previous president. It was just fascinating. And the trip itself personally was very fulfilling too, because during one of the visits to a platinum mine, that was the first moment I was inspired to look into strategy consulting during my second year. So I felt like it was an incredible experience that I don't think any other school allows you to do.
Yeah. And for context, the International Experience IE was the first of these international opportunities that the school introduced as part of the integrated curriculum. But there's now kind of a menu of options, and we call it, that are used to fill the global studies requirement, which is what we call that. IE is one of them. And there actually was a question about that. So I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about either what you've done in IE or a Global Network Week or some other opportunity to fulfill the global studies requirement, or what you're thinking about doing for those of you who haven't had the chance to do it yet.
So I also did an IE. We went to Israel, and one of the reasons that appealed to me is we spent, I think, fairly equal time, doing a lot of the business stuff, visiting tech, but we also got to learn a lot about the culture and do a lot of the historical significance. We got to actually go to their parliament and meet a representative. So I like the balance of culture and business, just because the viewpoint of the professor was that they're so integrated there that you can't understand Israeli business if you don't understand Israeli culture. And yeah, it was a good crew too. It's also fun because you can usually add on a little mini trip before or after, because you have a couple days on either end. So almost everyone who went on my IE also went to Jordan for a couple days, and we got to go see Petra, go stay out in the desert. It was beautiful. It's fun, all around fun trip.
Yeah, that's excellent. Any other thoughts on the global studies piece?
Yeah, I can add to that. So I didn't do an IE or a GNW, but I went on a special trip that was led by our academic affairs dean, Dean Scully, called the Kakahashi Project trip. So this was a partnership between SOM and the Japanese government, where the Japanese government essentially sponsored all 22 students from SOM to go to Japan, fully paid everything, and it was a 10-day trip, and we got to not only learn about U.S.-Japan trade relations, we also got to visit the Toyota production factory. We had a homestay with a Japanese family for 2 nights and really got to see what life was like. And the whole goal of this was to just strengthen relationships between Japan and future business leaders, and then also give students more perspectives on what it's like to do business in Japan and also immerse themselves in the culture there. So it was a really great experience. We had a ton of fun and ate really good food, and was able to experience different parts of Japan that you normally wouldn't go to if you were just visiting as a tourist.
That's great. Thank you for that. Those are all great examples. Want to shift gears a little bit. We have a little over 15 minutes left. Had a number of questions about recruiting. Obviously, professional development and sort of advancing your career is an important part of getting the MBA. And a few questions have actually come in since the panel started about that. So I want to ask maybe initially more broadly about the recruitment process, to the extent you've gone through it, the relationship with the CDO, but also just the process more generally. It's kind of open-ended, but any thoughts you have on that, and then we can maybe kind of ask some specific follow-up questions. I know the first years you haven't quite got to the point of doing, interviewing yet, but you're still probably along the way in terms of sort of information gathering and that part of the process.
Well, I mean, I can speak to date, but from my perspective, looking at aerospace and defense, it's actually a good example of what we call a non-traditional career path that we want to follow. And it speaks to some of the real differentiators for Yale. So my biggest advantage in recruiting at Yale SOM has actually been the alumni network, because SOMers go everywhere. And it's a combination of a very broad net across industries and also a very tight-knit community means that I've yet to have any Yale alumni refuse to get on the phone with me, help me out, point me in the direction of somebody else at a company that they may know, and it's been incredibly powerful. The CDO office is also, of course, very helpful in terms of some of the more obvious things like resume review, interview prep, cover letters, you name it, they do all of that. But because there's so much non-traditional, you really do end up finding SOM alumni kind of anywhere, and they're always willing to help, which is amazing.
That's great. And so, taking it a little bit further, one, I think, nice aspect, I'm speaking for myself, I want to get a sense from you all, of being here at SOM is that you can, much like you can connect to the rest of the university as a student, also on the recruiting side and as an alumnus or alumna, you can connect to the greater Yale alumni network, not just the SOM alumni network. Have any of you done that in your searches?
So I'll say P&G in particular, if you look, like that's just what I know most because that's where I was. Like they paired me up with Yale alum when I was there who was like basically like a running buddy, like somebody I could go to with everything. They weren't on my brand, so I could ask them all the dumb questions and get them out of the way. And like she did not go to SOM. She had been a Yale undergrad. Like they were very involved. I mean, like Eric said, I don't think I've heard of a single person who's reached out to an alum and not gotten a response. I mean, I talked to somebody when I was recruiting a little bit. I called him about a position at his company other than he was at. And the next day he's like, okay, I found a person. He's outlined the entire interview process. Here's everything you need to know. Like in 24 hours. I mean, it's pretty remarkable how quick they get back to you.
I can speak a little bit to a really traditional recruiting path. So as I mentioned, I went through consulting recruiting last year, and this year I'm one of the co-presidents of the consulting club. So we are one of the few professional clubs on campus that has a really structured curriculum. We teach a 12-week curriculum on essentially how to interview for consulting. So anything from the case interview to behavioral prepping, and it's all student-led, so all of the leaders that I work with are second years. There's a team of 10 of us, and we co-teach this curriculum to about 150 first years every week. And it's not only a great space to build your skills, but also you see like how invested the second year class is in helping the first years go through recruiting, because we understand that consulting recruiting can be really, really taxing and stressful, and also a really uncertain time in anyone's life, really. So just going through that experience as a first year last year and seeing how helpful the second years were really inspired me to want to take on a leadership role once I had gotten there. So I think in that way you can see the camaraderie transcend years.
Mm-hmm. I think, I'm just gonna add something really quickly. Within the scope of the MBA, there's 2 entry points into going to strategy consulting. You can enter as an intern, you can enter full-time, and I pursued the latter. And for that, I was able to leverage both my peers as well as alumni. So for peers, it was awesome to have like a constant flow of people who wanted to case with me. A real part of preparing yourself for the interview. You want to case with people who are at a similar level to you so that you both challenge each other into growing better. The second resource was alumni. There were a couple of alumni in the San Francisco office that I wanted to pursue for the companies I was applying to, and all of them within the same business day, and I know they're very busy, was like, I would love to case you, let me do it. One of them was on a vacation in Bermuda, like a very well-deserved vacation, and he did an hour-and-a-half case with me. And I don't take that like as if it were free. Like, I think that was a real special part of SOM.
Yeah, that's right.
I was just going to build off of what you were saying about second years. I think what has been most surprising to me is how much the second years help with recruiting. I am recruiting for marketing and tech, so I'm on a recruiting team for, like the marketing club has recruiting teams and the tech club also has recruiting prep teams. I'm on one for both of those, and the leaders for both of those clubs have been super helpful.
That's great. We talked a lot about peers, the students, alumni, the SOM alumni network, the larger Yale alumni network. One question that has come in was initially submitted, but also more recently. What's the engagement with the CDO like? Obviously we have a full-service career development office. Some people use it to varying degrees. Some people lean heavily on it. Some people, do things more independently. just want to get a sense of what your relationship with the CDOs has been like and how you've been able to leverage them in your search. And Eric, I know you talked about sort of the informationals and kind of the skill building part of the process, because that's what you've been up to so far. But any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could speak about my interaction with the CDO from two perspectives, as someone who used it as a second year and as someone who was hired by them as a second year. So during my first year, I used them mostly for mock interviews. I really liked that with my case interviews, I was relying on my peers, but for behavioral interviews, which is a huge piece of it, especially for something like tech where it's really personality and cultural fit based, I wanted to make sure that I was speaking to people from a variety of perspectives. And so that was really, really helpful. The CDO coaches are really easy to get in front of, and I really appreciated that. As a second year, working as a career advisor for them, we provide a lot of services. We do resume review, cover letter review, drop-in office hours. We provide workshops. And this is just as from the capacity of a career advisor. The career coaches never go away. And so they like send you emails on things you might be interested in. So it really is a constant partner that you can rely on throughout your recruiting journey.
Great. Thank
They
you.
even got me an interview for a company I didn't apply to. They were like, Apple wants to interview some veterans, or you're interested. And then one of the guys actually that they did that for is going now. I mean, like, they were just on the lookout for him and got him an interview.
That's great. That's a great way to get a job with Apple. I
Yeah.
hear. It's not a popular employer, I know, so it's not right. Switching gears, so we talked a lot about a number of different things. One aspect of being at school is obviously being in the community, being in sort of New Haven. And one question that came in is, what's been your favorite thing about living in New Haven? Vivian, you talked about the med school being across town. It's about probably like a 10-minute walk.
So I think Haven is the fact that having grown up in California, I didn't really experience seasons at all, and fall is incredible here. It's also just a really great food city. I love like exploring new restaurants and bars, and there's never a shortage of things to do. In fact, this weekend there's a repeal of prohibition bar crawl that a ton of I think 21 bars across the city are organizing. So everyone's gonna dress up in like Gatsby style clothing and then bar crawl. So I think a small group of us are gonna plan on doing that this weekend. But there's always just really interesting things to do. Museums that you have access to because you're a Yale student, art galleries, the like. So lots and lots to do, even though it can feel like a smaller city than, say, New York or San Francisco.
Yeah, I think there's three things that come to mind on why New Haven's, I think, a great place to live. The first is it's extremely walkable. I don't know how to drive, and so when I was looking for schools, I knew I had to go somewhere where I could walk around, and I felt like this was a great place to do that. The second one is, even if you're doing something every day, you know that you haven't even scratched the surface of things to do here, because there's a New Haven community, there's a greater Yale community, there are so many museums here, and you can make every day look different if that's your speed. The third one is I think there's a very, very high good restaurant to square mile ratio, particularly if you like pizza. Yeah. It's really, really good pizza. I'll just leave it at that.
I think also, having grown up in California, the seasons are my least favorite part. But what I really like is the cost of living coming from San Francisco. It's
fair.
a lot lower.
That's fair. No, that makes sense. We have maybe around 5 minutes left. So look to see if we have any other topics, big topics we haven't covered. But one question that had come through is just more generally, what's been the part of the SOM experience that has surprised you the most? You had certain expectations coming into the program. What was maybe sort of different in a way that you weren't expecting?
There's also one thing that kind of surprised me, honestly, and this does sort of go back to what we were just talking to. I assumed that I was here like a couple times a month. I just weeks are both right there. Like, honestly, they're really, like, I'm here all the time. Like, I hang out with Viv most weekends. But, like, the people here really have surprised me in a lot of ways, honestly. I mean, I had pretty high expectations, and they still managed to exceed it. But, yeah, the amount of fun I've had in New Haven, like, I mean, I knew business school would be fun, but the amount of fun has been kind of surprising.
I think I was most surprised by how well I got along with my learning team, just like right off the bat. We're all like people from very different backgrounds, but it really works, and they're actually like my closest friends.
That's great.
It's definitely what surprised me was how much I learned outside the class. Like the amount you learn through the various academic clubs, non-academic clubs, just chatting with a second year, chatting with your peers, and for my case, first years, is incredible. And it's all student driven too. These aren't ideas that come out of the administration or anything like that. Students come up with a great idea, and next thing you know, there's a club. There are 30 people that think it's a great idea that jump in, and just you learn some. I mean, that's how you go from a few classes, 1 or 2 or 3 classes a day, 4 days a week, to all of a sudden your schedule is packed. And I kind of figure I'm going to get to the end of my 2 years and just have my mind be blown by how much I absorbed and can't believe that it's already over. It's probably what's going to happen.
One of my favorite clubs started that way, because we have a club called the Silver Haired Scholars, for those of us who are old or old at heart.
Yeah.
And it started out as almost like a joke, but then they're like, well, this is actually, like, there's a lot of good issues that they could talk about. And so, I mean, like, they're doing a series of lectures right now on how to be an adult, and like having kids, like buying houses, like a lot of these things as people go out in the world and are settling down are like very useful life skills to have that a lot of us haven't dealt with. And so it's actually, and then we also do all the social stuff. They just do it slightly earlier than everyone else. So
I'll say that I think the one thing that has surprised me the most is just how collaborative everyone is here. I think a lot of times you think of business schools as really competitive places, and you have all these type A's in the same room. Like it becomes like a zero-sum game or something, and that is absolutely not the case here. Even having gone through consulting recruiting, which again is a very competitive process, still felt that same set of camaraderie at recruiting events where first years were helping each other out. If someone had forgotten like a blazer, someone would let them borrow it. Other things like just making sure that we're all trying to put our best foot forward and represent the school well as ourselves. And just knowing that sense of community is already here, can only imagine what it's going to be like after we graduate and become alumni.
Yeah, something about SOM that has been surprising to me is how I do feel like the typical SOM student really does go against the grain when you think of your typical MBA archetype. I think a clear way we see that happening is how SOM not only encourages people to be vulnerable, but even celebrates it. I've seen that operate on a small level and a big level. On the small level, in my learning team, someone was like, I'm just really, really, really bad at presenting. I feel like at any other business school, it would take longer than 3 weeks for you to admit that to a group of 8 peers. I think on a more macro level, on a community level, we have this weekly or bi-weekly event called Voices, where 2 or 3 extremely brave students get some in front of a classroom and speaks about some personal experience that they've had to a almost sold out, I mean it's free, but a sold out room. And I think that's just amazing. That is not something I expected at all from business school.
Yeah. And maybe picking up on that, we have 2 minutes left, so this will be the last question. There were questions actually about the admissions process as well, but actually next week, I think at this time, next week on the 6th, there'll be a panel, an application tips panel, that will be members of the admissions committee talking about the elements of the application and giving advice on how to approach them. So for admissions related questions, if you're interested in that, I would highly suggest attending that panel, which again is a week from today. But sort of picking up on your comment about voices, just to wrap it up, I'd love everyone to maybe talk about one thing. I mean, voices, maybe sort of the Garza Cup or the hockey club, but one thing that students here shouldn't miss when you come here. So some experience or some opportunity that you think is really kind of either epitomized the experience or really is something that you cherish as part of your experience here at Yale SOM. If you want to, maybe Julie, you've already sort of given yours. You can, I don't know, Abby, if you want to start, and then we'll go. And Vivian, I'll let you go last this time for a change.
Sure. This is tough. I think Yale tradition that we haven't talked about yet is, or SM tradition that we haven't talked about yet is closing bell.
I'm glad I was
Yeah, so closing bell happens almost every Thursday, because most of our weeks run from Monday to Thursday, so that's like the end of the week for us. And it starts at like 5:30 after class. All of the students and faculty are invited to come and have a drink and hang out with each other and sort of chat about their weeks and decompress. So that's really nice.
Yeah, well, since she stole mine, I'll go. We have a panel of Ask Me Anythings, which I really like, where they'll get a group of people up, and it can be, based off their region or background or political point of view or whatever that they feel like they want to integrate better with the rest of the school or kind of share their perspective, but they're afraid that people are too afraid to ask questions. So they actually give them a format similar to what you're using now, where people can submit questions anonymously if they want for all the questions they're too scared to ask. And the whole goal is just to get the conversation started and to kind of get some of those opinions out that you might have missed because you don't know their perspective. So I really enjoy that panel.
That's great. And it's pretty wide ranging too, yeah. So it could be based on where people are from, their sort of race, ethnicity, sort of political views. There was one today. Was it about ask me anything about mental health? I think that's right. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with hockey.
Hockey, you're going to go with that? I got to stand on that. Okay.
Awesome.
Something that's coming up is Coffee House. So this is a tradition where I think it takes place every semester at least once, where students come together and perform in front of their peers, and it's typically hosted not at SOM but at Gypsy, which is our graduate bar, and it's incredible to see how talented your peers are and how they're not only really smart and also really driven in the classroom, but then can get up on stage and sing a cappella and play all these instruments that you don't even know about. And just knowing that you're surrounded by so many diverse, wonderful people is incredible. And then you see them in the hallway and just know that they have this whole other life and aspect to them that is beneath the surface, which is really great.
Fantastic, thank you. I think that's a great note to end on. We're right just a few minutes over time, but I know you all have to get to class. I know there's a class coming in here at 1 o'clock. So I want to thank all the panelists for participating today, sharing your experiences here at SOM. We really do appreciate it. Thank you all for attending. Hopefully you got some good information and a good sense of what life is like here at Yale SOM. If you are thinking of applying in the near future and want to get more information about pointers on how to do that, we do have the application tips today, so feel free to sign up for that. Otherwise, we appreciate your taking the time to be with us today and look forward to staying in touch in the future. Thank you. Have a great day.